Can begin.
Thank you, Miguel. I'm Susan Bonfield. I'm the Director of Environment for the Americas, and it's a pleasure to have all of you here today. I want to give a big shout out to our Migratory Bird Day team and our Environment for the Americas staff who are located across the Western Hemisphere in the United States, in Venezuela, where Miguel is calling in from, Mexico, and Trinidad and Tobago. So we work to bring you World Migratory Bird Day in your regions, and you can reach out to us for more information. But Environment for the Americas is based on four pillars of work: our conservation work, our education work, our trainings for youth interested in careers in conservation, and then our work protecting birds and their habitats through our own research and other activities. If you're interested in learning more about us, you can definitely go online or you can reach out to us, and we'd love to have you more involved in all of our activities wherever we are. Our education work, however, is extremely important through World Migratory Bird Day. We work with over 800 organizations from Canada to Argentina and the Caribbean, bringing bird conservation education to communities. And that's one of the reasons why we're so excited about our program this year, is that our work in communities really helps to bring conservation to the ground, helping people understand more about migratory birds, the threats to their populations, and the ways that everybody can be involved in helping to protect them. I want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to all of our sponsors. This program wouldn't be possible without them. They contribute the funds and the resources that we need to put together these webinars, to develop education materials, to distribute them across the Western Hemisphere, and to do so much more on the ground with our partners. Our Global Flyways partners include the Forest Service, the National Park Service, and Bird Fee. Thanks to our title sponsors, Partners in Flight, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and Feather Friendly. And our program sponsors include Fatal Light Awareness Program in Canada, Optics for the Tropics, National Audubon Society, Vortex Optics, Department of Defense, Pepco Holdings, and then we have many friends across the region who help us to get the word out. So the Programa de Aves Urbanas, the Urban Bird Program in Mexico and other parts of Latin America, as well as Conabio, Nature Canada, and Birds Caribbean. Thanks so much to all of them. For those of you who are new to us, we've been coordinating World Migratory Bird Day through Environment for the Americas for a number of years, since about 2008. And we each year host a different conservation theme, and you can see that we have developed our programs to reach some of the most concerning threats to migratory birds, including declines in insect populations, the increase
The
in
increase
plastics
in
and their
plastics
impacts
and
on
their
birds,
impacts on birds,
and also the
and
importance of the
also
night
the
sky.
importance of the night sky.
For some reason, I'm hearing a feedback on me. I don't know if we can cut that. We also work globally, so this program is hosted globally with our partners, the Convention on Migratory Species, the African Eurasian Waterbird Agreement, the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership. And through those partners, we meet regularly to develop the program and to host events globally around the world. So thank you so much to them for being our partners and for all the work that they help us accomplish around the world. I want to get into our conservation theme this year, which is community science. And we're using the term community science because that's what we do through World Migratory Bird Day. We work as a community conservation based program where we work with your teams, your people, your pueblos, your cities, your towns, all over the Western Hemisphere to raise awareness of conservation and of migratory birds. This year, we're so excited about the art. This art features 7 species of birds. Each one represents a community science program that benefits its conservation. And this art, which is always at the heart of the messaging for World Migratory Bird Day, this art is hand embroidered by Luisa Lacerda. This is our artist, Luisa. Luisa is from Brazil and she did an amazing job. Her embroidery is just fantastic, as you can see. This is the first time that we've had this kind of art featured as the art for World Migratory Bird Day, and we want to give her a big shout out and a big thank you for the work that she put into it. We selected these 7 species again, so you'll be seeing them throughout the year, but of course you're welcome to highlight the species that you're concerned about where you live. I want to let you know that there are so many materials that are available to you, and we encourage you to go to our Environment for the Americas shop where you can purchase materials or you can download them through our resource directory. You can also go to our Trello board on our migratorybirdday.org website. And on the Trello board, you'll find so many resources that you can use for your programs and events. All of these are at your fingertips. You can download them, use them on your social media, use them in your programs, however you'd like to make use of them for World Migratory Bird Day this year. We host this series every month. It's the third Thursday of each month, and we're excited about the event coming up in March when we'll be talking about ethics and community science. So while you're introducing your visitors or your community to community science, we want to make sure that we are limiting our impact on birds. And so we're excited to have Michelle Gruss, who's an amazing photographer, and she'll talk about ethical bird photography. Ana Amable, who will be bringing us her presentation from Peru to discuss ethical birding in the field. And then we'll be presenting some research on the ethics of birding and how birding can impact birds and what you can do to reduce that impact. So look forward to the next session, and please join us again. And I'd just like to go on and start with our first presenter. The fun thing about today is that I know 2 of the speakers, and I'm getting to know the third one, which is fun. But Rick Bonney is known for his work on community science projects through the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And so, Rick, without further ado, I would like to bring you on to start your presentation, and I'm going to spotlight you for everyone. And
all right.
Can begin.
Let me make sure you can hear me okay.
You are perfect.
All right. So thank you so much, Susan, for inviting me to be part of the program today. I've been emeritus now for almost 7 years, and I don't do a lot of programs or talks anymore. But when Susan asked me to talk about the origins of the bird programs at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and beyond, I couldn't resist that because I've been involved with the lab since the undergraduate days in the mid-'70s and always very, very interested in participatory science. So you might or might not be aware that most years a report comes out called State of the Birds 2025. Hit the next slide. Sometimes it focuses on the Americas, sometimes other places, like there was one about India not so long ago. And all of the information in State of the Birds comes from citizen science, participatory science, community science programs, including this one, eBird, which is a project that was originated at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Hit the next slide. That is the current day Lab of Ornithology. As I said, I've been there since the mid-'70s. The lab didn't look like that back then, but it was involved with different kinds of participatory science right from its earliest days. Next slide. This program, eBird, which is international in scope, many of you might know about it. Many of you might use it, either to report birds or to look and see where birds are seen around the world. It's really at its core very simple. It's a checklist project. And so you can go into the website and you can say where you are, or you can do it with the iPhone or any smartphone now and use the app. If you use the app, it knows where you are. It knows when it is. It knows what you're likely to see. And then you can report what you've seen through a series of different protocols. Next slide. And all of these data from all around now the world are brought together in this massive database. I think it's the biggest participatory science database in the world. I may be wrong about that. I think it is, though. And you can go and you can explore species. You could say, okay, I want to know everything that's known about cinnamon teal, say, or you can explore a region. You can say, okay, I want to know anything about my town or a certain wildlife refuge. And once you do that, once you choose either species or region, go to the next slide, then you can use a series of different tools to make maps, graphs, bar charts that really graphically show you what is happening bird-wise in that area. Here's one that I happened to make at Dead Horse Ranch State Park in Utah when I was there a few years ago. And you can go in there and you can see exactly what's being seen and when, which is really pretty cool. Next slide shows you that eBird began in 2002, that it now has more than 1 million contributors, that each year 100 million checklists come in from around the world, that more than 10,000 species have been documented, and very importantly, in 2024, more than 250 peer-reviewed publications used some form of eBird data. So not only is this a checklist that allows you to make maps and graphs and bar charts and see what birds are around you or in a place you want to go, but people who write scientific papers and use and build conservation programs around birds use these data. 250 publications in 2024 alone. I don't have the number yet for 2025. So the next slide. Now, that last slide said that eBird began in 2002. Well, yes and no. eBird, more or less as we know it today, started in 2002, 7 years after the internet had become usable by the public, at least in North America. I'm not sure about how that worked in the rest of the world. But you could argue that eBird had its origins. You wouldn't even need to argue. You can say that eBird had its origins in 1915, when this guy here, Arthur A. Allen, the first professor of ornithology in the world, founded the Lab of Ornithology. He was in the entomology department and he studied birds. So one day he hung a sign on his door and it said, "This is the Laboratory of Ornithology." And that is really how it came about. Later, of course, it became an independent department of the university with its own charter and its own administrative board. But back in 1915, Allen was the first professor of ornithology. And if the next slide is what I think it is, it will show you that the lab looked a lot different back then than it did in that first picture that I showed you. This actually wasn't built in 15. This was built in 1956. But the next slide will show you that there seem to be some slides missing. I'm not really sure what happened. The slide that was supposed to be next was a picture of his graduate students back in the day, showing that, like other professors, he had a real stable core of graduate students who were doing cutting stage ornithology around the country. But in addition to teaching ornithology and having these graduate students, it was very important to Allen, who you can see in the middle of this picture, to reach out and work with the public. And these folks here were members of the Campus Birding Club, sometime probably in the 50s. And he made it a point to work with folks and bring them in and get them excited about birds. But he also made it a point to have people come together, next slide, every Monday night for a seminar at the Lab of Ornithology. And one of the things they did was say what birds they had seen and heard in the Cayuga Lake Basin that past week. And from that assembled one of the very first organized checklists of birds anywhere, which was later shown to be useful in a scientific way. In 1965, Allen and his colleagues at the lab started one of the very earliest citizen science programs. It's called the Cornell Nest Record Card Program, although it's now known as Nest Watch. And people recorded what they saw in their backyards, in their neighborhoods, and sent the information in on Nest record cards. Next slide. The success of that program and the fact that the lab was so interested in what we now call citizen science or community science is one of the reasons I got interested in Cornell and the lab. And this is me in 1972. When I arrived at Cornell, I decided that my summer job as a trash collector was really a lot of fun, but that I would really rather get a job more in line with birds. So I went to Cornell, I went to the lab, next slide, and I started working there in the early 80s. And I'm going to skip this slide in the interest of time, go to the next slide. And so I was one of the folks that helped to start Project Feeder Watch in 1987. Now, Feeder Watch had actually been started earlier by Bird Studies Canada, which now has another name, to keep track of the birds that were seen at feeders, at people's feeders. And this was built on the success of Nest Watch. People were sending in so much great information about nests. We said, well, let's get them to send in information about the birds at their feeders. The next slide shows something we didn't expect, which was people said, I learned a lot about bird behavior. I was just counting the birds, but taking part in this project increased my thirst for knowledge. It was fun and it was educational. And with that information, we went to the National Science Foundation and we said, you know what? Next slide. Most of what we know about the environment comes from citizens, people who are paying attention to the world around them. And we were successful in getting a grant from the National Science Foundation called Public Participation in Ornithology. And when I go back and I look at this 1990 grant, the title of it, it amuses me a little because we've gone a full circle from citizen science back to using public participation, which we used in that first grant proposal. I don't have time to talk about the projects that we did with that first grant. Click onto the next slide. But I can tell you that all of the projects, this is animated, so go click, click, click. All of the projects had 3 points: to collect information that we could use for basic science, to collect information that we could use for conservation, and to help people learn. And the next slide shows that we were very successful in building a program. In 1996, we named it officially Citizen Science, published an article in our magazine, Living Bird, called Citizen Science, a Lab Tradition. And if you trace back the origins of the term citizen science from around the world, they almost all go back to this citation. Next slide shows that a frustration that I had was that when we would work in a classroom doing feeder watch, the kids would say, oh, look, there goes a roseate spoonbill. But I can't count it. It's not in our feeder watch area. And in the next slide, another frustration. People from all around the country and even around the world had all these data. And there was no place to put them. There was no bird checklist unless it was nesting or at a feeder. There was no place to put a checklist. And we thought if we could get all this information out of shoeboxes and out of closets and into a database, imagine how powerful it would become. So next slide, we came up with the idea of eBird in around the year 2000 to join all the projects that we'd started by then. Click, next slide. And eBird was designed to gather information about any bird, anytime, anywhere. And as you know, as I've said, it's now worldwide. In fact, I think that after North America, really the largest number of participants are in India now. So I want to leave you with just a couple of thoughts about this. One being that all of this started from passion. It started from the passion of Arthur A. Allen and the fact that he bucked the tide of professional ornithologists who said, you can't work with the public, that's not professional, and said, yes, we can and we must, to set the stage for me and all of my colleagues that came after to be able to build all these programs based on what I call the lifeblood of the lab, which is our members and our constituents. Now, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts here. First of all, there are a lot of citizen science projects out there now. Click. And you really need to be aware of all the different databases. This is from citsci.org, but there are so many to be able, if you're working with the public, to make sure that you're getting people involved in the very best one for them wherever they are. And in the next slide, I want to point out that recruiting and retaining participants is one of the biggest challenges for participatory science. And the reason is because a lot of people forget that you need to start with the audience. Click on the next animation here. You need to know what it is that your audience wants to do before you tell them what to do. So you have to understand your audience. It's really market research. or you're never going to get the participants you need to answer whatever question you're trying to answer. And then finally, in the next slide, there's always going to be this challenge of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And when I talk about understanding your audience, I mean every audience and all audiences. I think the next animation shows the last project I was involved with. I still am involved with some of them, but before I retired officially from the lab, the last one I was involved with was one of our versions of our urban bird studies projects. And this was one in which we were trying to work with folks in cities, and we successfully recruited PIs and members of the advisory board who knew what the heck they were talking about when we tried to work with diverse audiences. And for once and for all, I was the minority in the room, and I was able to sit back and shut up and listen and watch these folks develop the program. So understanding your audience and building a program for that audience, not for the scientists, is essential, absolutely essential to make these participatory projects go. And I think Arthur Allen knew that, and I think he'd be proud of what we'd accomplished. And if I'm right, that was my last slide.
Oh,
Yeah,
I don't know how that one got back in there again.
wanted to bring Doc Allen back into it one last time, but that was my last slide, and it looks like I did that in 12 minutes. I'm sorry, 2 minutes over.
That's
But
okay. You did a great job.
I tried to keep it slow enough for the translator to keep up.
No, thank you so much, Rick. It was great having you on, and we really appreciate that perspective and all the work that you did over your career to bring all these projects to us. It's amazing that, they're still continuing and growing, and they're just amazing what they've accomplished. So congratulations to you, and I'm glad you made an exception to join us today.
Yeah, me too.
All right, I'm gonna pull you off of the spotlight. I'm having a hard time unspotlighting you. Maybe Alex, you could help me unspotlight. And our next presenter, I'm excited to present, is Steve Beissinger. I first met Steve at the University of Michigan, where he was finishing up his PhD. And then he went on to Yale and then to Berkeley, and I don't know, I probably lost track of you in some places in between, Steve. But his work on the Grinnell surveys has been amazing, and what we try to do in these presentations is to give you an overview and then to bring you the importance and the scientific research. So that's what Steve is going to do. He's going to share with you how community science projects can benefit bird conservation by sharing the information that it gathers. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks for the invitation to come and speak with this diverse audience. And bienvenido a mis amigos en las Américas y en todo el mundo.
Hello to my friends in the Americas and all over the world.
So I'm going to talk today about the power of observation. And, science is usually thought of as working by creating elegant experiments with controls and looking to see how the treatment responds. And when we start thinking about large-scale phenomenon, that's really not possible to do over large geographic regions. And so here's where the power of observation really becomes important. Next slide. And Joseph Grinnell really understood the power of observations. Grinnell was the first director of the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology at UC Berkeley. And the museum is a research unit there. Grinnell wrote about his ideas of starting a bird collection for the museum there. And this quote hung on the wall for many years. It says, "At this point, I wish to emphasize what I believe will ultimately prove to be the greatest purpose of our museum. The value will, however, not be realized until the lapse of many years, possibly a century, assuming that our material is safely preserved. And this is that the student of the future will have access to the original faunal conditions in California and the West, wherever we work now." Well, we were the student of the future. And wherever we worked, next slide, please. Well, Grinnell was working everywhere in California. He was a workaholic. All the map of California here, you see all these little dots. These are places where he collected specimens with his students and collaborators. The dots are scaled by tens of specimens. The colors are birds, mammals, and herps. It's an amazing collection that he put together, but it wasn't just the specimens that made Cornell unique. It was the field notes. And the field notes have played an important part in the work that we've done. Next slide, please. Here are the field notes in the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology's library. Cornell was pretty draconian about making all of his students collect field notes and making them do it in a certain way. And those field notes then have become part of the record at the university. Next slide. What was it like to work with Grinnell? Well, kind of hoping you'll hear, but I'm thinking maybe you won't.
The itch, but when he had that notebook open and writing notes, the whole time he was taking a bird census
Here's
wherever
Ward.
he went. And we'd be sitting in camp and we'd both be skinning. Pretty soon he'd throw a rat over to me. He'd say, "Here, Russell, finish this one up." And he'd just throw me the skin and pick up his notebook and start writing. And he said over and over, he said, "Put it all down. You may not think it's important, but somebody may."
And we were that somebody. Next slide, please. So in the early 2000s, we began the Grinnell Resurvey Project. And I think this picture kind of translates to you what we've been doing. We have been going back to places all around California. Next slide. And looking at the places where Grinnell and his colleagues and students surveyed, collecting information from them and resurveying in order to understand the changes that have taken place as a result of climate change and land use change. Next slide, please. So we've been to 320 places now, and I'm going to use some recent resurveys in the Mojave Desert to kind of illustrate to you how we've been able to use the power of observation. So the original surveys here were conducted in the early 1900s, well before climate change took place. And notice also that Grinnell left us with some photos of the places where they were. So we could do photo retakes, and you can see that in these protected areas, Death Valley, Joshua Tree National Park, Mojave National Preserve, they look pretty similar. Next slide. But and the field notes allow us to sometimes get the numbers of birds that they saw, sometimes every hour, sometimes along a particular trail. More often than not, they're like the notes on the right that just tell us today, these are the birds that we saw in and around camp or where they went. And sometimes they tell us, here's what we saw today that we didn't see yesterday. And we can use all of those kinds of information in what have come to be known as occupancy models that allow you to correct for the probability of detection, which we know will differ between our surveys and Grinnell's. Next slide. So we mine those surveys and we go back to the sites. And here's an example of the kinds of things that we've found. In the top slides, each dot is a species. And you can see on the x-axis the proportion of sites that it was found at historically, and on the y-axis, the proportion of sites it was found at now, corrected for any differences in detectability. In the bottom two graphs, you can see the same kinds of things, but now we're looking at the number of species found at each site. So each dot is a site rather than a species. Colored blue means a place that has, or a species that has increased significantly. And colored red means a place or a species that has declined significantly. And what you can see here in the same sites, really different responses in the Mojave Desert to a couple of degrees centigrade of warming over the past century and more drying, making it even more severe environment for the birds and mammals to survive in. The mammals have changed very little. The number of species per site is about the same, with the exception, the proportion of sites occupied is about the same for each species, and the number of species found at a site are almost the same. The gray ones indicate not a significant change. If you look at the birds, though, you can see that almost a third of the birds declined in the proportion of sites that they occupy. Only the common raven has expanded. And you can see the number of species at sites has declined as well. So the birds and the mammals are exposed differently to climate change. Most mammals are nocturnal, most birds diurnal, and you can really see the effect of that changes in exposure. Next slide. Here's Grinnell's neighborhood. Back in 1889, when he was growing up in Pasadena, today in 2021, it's the same area. Next slide, please. From his field notes, we could go back and look in not only Los Angeles, an area that's urbanized a great deal, but also the Central Valley, an area that's had a lot of agriculture. And here we can see that the number of species that have increased significantly and the proportion of occupancy changed, proportion of sites they occupy, has kind of balanced out in the Central Valley, some increasing, some decreasing, and others, this yellow color not changing. In Los Angeles, on the other hand, you can see a large decline here in the number of species that have declined relative to those that have increased. Urbanization and climate change in LA have been a double whammy for the species there. Next slide. So now we're putting together the entire state, and we can look across 320 sites. And we can see sites that have been unoccupied through both surveys in yellow, blue sites where a species has persisted in both surveys, greenish sites that have been colonized over time, and red sites that have gone extinct. And we have species like the American kestrel on the left that shows a major decline in occupancy, and Anna's hummingbird on the right that shows a major increase in occupancy over time. We're excited to put that information together. Next slide, the last one. This has been a project that many people have participated in over the past 20 years. These are the colleagues that have led important components of that project, and we thank all of them. I'd like to thank Joseph Grinnell and his students and colleagues as well for maintaining the notebooks and having the vision to do so. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was excellent. We appreciate that presentation, an incredible effort, and we're excited to hear more about what the outcomes are going to be from that, the results from your work. I'm going to bring on our next presenter, which is Amber. Amber, I'm trying to add you to the spotlight. There we go. If you can turn on your video, and then I'll pull Steve down. Thank you so much. Now, as we move into Amber's presentation, and thanks Amber for joining us from the Pennsylvania Breeding Bird Atlas, you can start thinking about your questions for the Q&A session, which will open up as Amber finishes her presentation. So thank you so much, Amber.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We can move into the first slide. So let's just jump right into talking about atlases. I'm going to try to talk pretty broadly about atlases, but we'll probably use some examples from the Pennsylvania Atlas, since that is, of course, what I'm most familiar with. So when we're talking about bird atlases, we're really talking about two different things. We're talking about the field work to collect the data for the project, and then also about the final products that are produced, the maps of bird species that are created from that data. Atlases are these really wonderful collaborations between researchers, birders, birding organizations, and often governments or conservation agencies that are helping to fund these projects. Next slide, please. Atlasing The fieldwork portion of atlasing is really much like regular birding, but you're also slowly and carefully observing bird behaviors and trying to document evidence of breeding. The region of study is divided into a grid. Depending on the scale of the project and the volunteer base, birders will survey all or a designated subset of the grid cells to try to document as many breeding species as possible in each grid cell. So in the background here, you see Pennsylvania divided into our nearly 5,000 atlas blocks, each about 9 square miles or 23 square kilometers. This scale varies by project, so some atlases use much larger grid cells. And the photos here are some examples of the 22 different observations that can be documented as evidence or confirmation of breeding. This is really what sets atlases apart from other community science projects that may only collect data on presence of birds but not confirm breeding, such as breeding bird surveys. So those other types of surveys show us often larger scale, larger regional trends. They also typically require less effort and can be done long term. However, actually documenting that birds are breeding is critical information, especially at these local levels. But it's also very time consuming. So this is why atlases are typically shorter term periodical projects, and why volunteer birders are at the heart of these atlases and critical for their success. And this type of birding, watching birds and getting to see all these really cool behaviors is also a large part of what makes atlasing so fun for so many birders. There's such joy in getting to have these intimate moments with birds and going to new places and learning new things. I've been birding for almost 20 years, and now with atlasing in Pennsylvania, I'm learning so many new things each breeding season that I have never observed or never really thought about what it means before. So atlasing has this really amazing way of connecting birders with the birds and landscapes around them, maybe more than ever before. Okay, next slide. I'm just going to touch really briefly on the history of atlases. So we've been conducting bird atlases for about 60 years now, starting with a small atlas in the West Midlands, a region of the United Kingdom. It was a success, and the idea kind of spread and expanded from there. And atlases moved into US and Canada, Asia, Africa, and finally into South America with the first South American atlas was in Chile, published in, I believe, 2018. And I was asked the other day about sort of South American and Latin American atlases. And aside from the Chile one, the only other one I know of is Puerto Rico, which just wrapped up recently. But if anyone knows of any others, please correct me, and you could share that in the chat at the end. Next slide, please. So these numbers are from this 2021 review of atlases, so a little outdated already, but over 600 atlases have been conducted around the world in over 93 countries. This is probably closer to 100 countries by now. There's a strong European and North American bias, but that is improving in more recent years. Historically, 70% or more of atlases have focused only on breeding birds, but that is increasingly changing as we are kind of thinking more and more about monitoring birds outside of the breeding season. And this is the case with the Pennsylvania Atlas. So we're actually no longer the Pennsylvania Breeding Bird Atlas. We're the Pennsylvania Bird Atlas because we do have a winter survey component as well. Atlases take place over a huge range of geographic scales, from hyperlocal to multinational. And the data collection is typically about 5 years. And then ideally, the project will be repeated every 20, maybe 25 years when funding and support are available. Next slide, please. Atlases, of course, do require money and a lot of effort to conduct, so it's crucial that the organizers can really articulate why the project is worthwhile, especially when so many people are already contributing to these other projects, some of which we just talked about. Simply put, atlases are often the most comprehensive bird surveys that take place in a region. And they're especially important for collecting that fine scale breeding data that I've talked about. Atlases produce this invaluable data on distribution and abundance of bird species in the region. And when we can repeat them, they help us see changes over time. And all of this data then feeds into conservation decisions, land use planning, identification of species of conservation concern. And atlases also, I guess I touched on this just a little bit, but atlases are great for educating the birders of the region and really building this sense of community that has a long-lasting impact that continues long after the atlas is over. Next slide, please. I think I'll skip this one in interest of time. I was just going to touch on some specific examples about conservation impacts in Pennsylvania. I can circle back to that at the end if there's time and folks are interested. But one of the themes that we've been talking about in this webinar today is about how our participatory science has evolved over time, and it's the same case with atlases. So our atlases 40, 50 years ago looked similar to those cards that Rick showed when people were participating early on in Project Nest Watch, which had a different name then that I can't remember now. But that's how in Pennsylvania, in our first atlas, people would fill out a card for each atlas block that they worked in and mail it in at the end of the season. And you really wouldn't see what was going on across the whole region until the end, when you got a chance to finally see the final publication. So nowadays, as far as I know, I assume that all atlases that are happening are taking place via online data platforms. And I have some of the popular examples or some of these platforms listed here. eBird is the one that I am most familiar with, of course. That is what the Pennsylvania Bird Atlas, how we collect our data. It is a specific project within eBird. On the left here, you can see a list of atlases that are currently or have taken place in eBird. California is missing from this list. California just launched their first statewide atlas this year, so this list just hasn't been updated yet. But the majority of Pennsylvania atlasers are using the mobile app to collect data. It's fast and easy. Rick kind of touched on some of the really handy things that eBird does. And the same thing happens when eBird is being used to collect data for an atlas, especially when people are using the mobile app. Maps are built in, so you can see where you are in a block, where the block boundaries are around you. And then once you submit your checklist, the data updates very quickly on the website so birders can see what is happening around the state, which is very fun to follow, but also, probably more importantly, can use this information to look at blocks around them and see where more atlasing is needed and kind of plan how they can help out most effectively. If you are familiar with eBird, you know how eBird uses gamification to keep birders coming back for more. And it works the same with the atlas. So if you're atlasing, you can see how many species you've confirmed, how many blocks you have atlased in, these various metrics that you can try to kind of stay at the top of the list if you are a person that kind of enjoys that sort of thing. All right, next slide, please. In addition to that gamification that kind of keeps sucking people back in, we have some other things that we're doing in Pennsylvania, much like other atlases are doing to recruit and try to keep birders engaged in the project. So one of the things that I just want to acknowledge with the Pennsylvania Atlas that I'm very fortunate for, that makes my life and my job much easier, is that we have this long atlas history, or this long history of producing well-executed and highly respected atlases in Pennsylvania. So you can see our first two atlases here. So well ahead of our third atlas, which we're currently in, starting before I was even hired, birders were very excited to get going on the third atlas, and we're spreading the word around the state to maybe newer or younger birders that didn't really know what an atlas was. So we've had that benefit. I know that new atlases just getting started for their first time, it may be slightly more work to kind of convince people to join and get people excited about the project. We also have volunteer coordinators around the state that are connected with their local birders and help share information, get the word out, recruit people. Our statewide ornithological society and our local bird clubs have been amazing at promoting the project and hosting atlas presentations and atlas-focused bird walks. So a lot of people want to come see how to atlas and how to use the eBird app, firsthand, in person with someone. So that's a really useful tool. In this era, we use social media a lot to share information and kind of inspire people and ask questions. Our really big ones that get a lot of activity are Facebook and Discord. We use Zoom and YouTube, to host talks and Q&A sessions, and we can put those recordings up on YouTube as well as other informational videos. And then there's a screenshot here of our Atlas website that is hosted within eBird. So this is where we can kind of house all of our resources and materials and how-tos for birders, as well as news, updates, and articles. Of course, a project this big is not without its challenges. So one of the big things that we see in Pennsylvania is that we have quite a lot of eBirders who are choosing to not participate in the Atlas. Some find the project too complicated or too tech-oriented, since so much is online. A lot of people are participating in a lot of these projects already, and they simply don't want to add another community science project to their agenda. And another one that I find so fascinating is that a lot of birders are so set in their ways. They like to bird at certain places, they like to bird in certain ways. And participating in an atlas may require altering some of those habits a little bit, and some people simply don't want to do that. So we do try to make this project as accessible as possible to folks, while maintaining our scientific standards for the project. And that's something that I continue to work on, but we do have to accept that some people simply don't want to participate, and that's okay as well. Next slide, please. Yep, and I guess I'm just wrapping things up here. I know that seeing where folks are coming from, I know that some of you are in locations that have or have had atlases take place, and I know a lot of you are not, and you might be interested or excited to participate in an atlas at some point. So I want to make sure that folks know that you don't have to be from a region to participate in an atlas there. So if it's in a neighboring region, neighboring state or country, somewhere that you can travel to, you can still participate in the project, even if it's just, for a day or for a week. Speaking as an Atlas coordinator, I promise you that we want everyone to participate and contribute to our project as possible. All that we ask is that you, look over the materials and make sure that you understand how to properly collect and submit your data. And if there's no atlas around you, like we've been talking about, there are all these other great projects that you can contribute to. I wanted to mention NestWatch because that's a big one if folks are interested in breeding birds. That can be very fun. And it was great to hear about the origins of that program. And can you go back 2 slides real quick, please? And so these on the right here, I didn't really mention this, but those purple circles are the breeding codes in eBird. So that is how you document those breeding behaviors or evidence of breeding that you can observe. And those are accessible to everyone. You can go back to that last one again. So many people kind of see those and don't really know what they're used for. They're used very little outside of atlases or other specific projects like that. And eBird's information online, the definitions of those codes is a little bit basic. So I think a lot of people just don't quite understand how to use them. But if you're interested, check out any of those atlases that are in eBird and read up on all the atlases provide more in-depth definitions of those breeding codes and how and when and why you would use them. So you can start actually applying those in your own birding when appropriate and kind of beef up the data that you're submitting in eBird already. So that's just something that everyone can do. All right, I will stop talking there. I probably went a little bit longer than I was supposed to.
Oh, all great information, and thank you so much, Amber, for joining us today. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up, if our panelists could turn on their video cameras so I can spotlight them again, then I can get them on. So I'm going to start with a question for Steve. Steve, given the resurveys and the information that's been gathered from them, especially in light of declines due to climate change, do you know of any conservation efforts that have come from that work? Like, has it motivated any activity to conserve some of the birds that maybe are seen as declining, or any other aspect, of the project? Has it motivated anything like that? Or do you know? Oops, you're muted, Steve. Sorry.
People generally like me muted. I think early on it was recognized there would be value by being able to extend the spaceline backwards and to the early 1900s. And one example that I like to point out to is in our early work, some of the first papers we produced were on mammals and how their elevational ranges have shifted upward in the Sierras. And for the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service, then President Obama stood in front of falls in Yosemite National Park, where we had done a lot of this work, and started talking about how the mammals are moving upslope and how the parks are not protected against climate change. And we recognized that we were able to put forward information like this in a way that affected how parks and protected areas were going to be thinking about their resources well into the future. So that's one example. We've partnered with National Park Service because we have worked in 6 national parks, forests as well, some of the state parks, and provided those kinds of information directly to them.
Thanks, Steve.
That's one good
excellent.
example.
Yeah, thank you. The next question is for Rick. Rick, this is a general question. Just how can someone start their own community science project within eBird?
So eBird has a set of tools to allow people to do that. And I'm afraid that I might get myself in trouble by trying to be too specific. And what I would suggest you do is go on the eBird website and look at the staff listing and find the person who is the community project organizer. There's at least one person whose full-time job is now to work with the community to help them get projects started. But eBird, at least last I knew, was set up so that you could have your own homepage, your own set of directions, just like the atlases are doing. It's your own project, except then when you go to enter the data, you're going into the main eBird database. Whoever it is that's in charge of that right now, it's a delightful young woman last time I was at the lab, can help you figure out how to get something started. And I don't think it's very hard.
Excellent. Thanks, Rick. That should get them started. So we do have a lot of participants on from Latin America today. So Christian Octavio asks about any bird atlases from Chile or other parts of Latin America. Do you know of any, Amber, from other parts of the world?
Yeah, the Chile Atlas was in the 2010s. That was I believe that was the first South American atlas. They published in 2018, I think. And then the Puerto Rico Atlas, which just finished 1 or 2 years ago, I think maybe just 1 year ago. Those are the only two that I'm aware of.
And for the Atlas program in general, is there like a group that gets together to talk about atlases, or is there any sort of collaboration among atlases?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a North American Atlas Committee. I assume there is something similar in Europe, but I'm not familiar with it. So it had kind of fizzled out for a while, but in the last I don't know, 5 years maybe, there's been more activity, thanks in large part to folks from the New York Atlas and the Maryland, DC Atlas. They were really great in getting that committee really activated again. So we've been meeting annually, I think, and have some different committees going. And there's been a lot of work to really standardize these atlases, I think more than they had been. Um, and it's also just really great for people to share resources so that each like, again, I'm speaking largely about um, US state atlases here, but it's pretty similar for, I guess the Canadian atlases are involved in this as well. So we share a lot of resources because everything is being done very similarly. So folks aren't rewriting things for each new atlas. So it's a really wonderful community.
Excellent. Thank you, Amber. So we had a question about from someone from the Bureau of Land Management. Thank you, Holly, who's asking about hosting a migratory bird day and how they can use the tools today to host a successful event with the public. I'll tackle this one. Our goal for the year when you host your migratory bird day events is that you take the materials that we provide and the information you're learning from these webinars and apply them as they fit best to your site. But what we're hoping you'll do is at least teach your visitors and your participants about birds, threats to birds, and bird watching, and how they can participate in one of the existing projects. Or you're welcome to find an existing project, and we're happy to help you with that you could do as part of your activity at your site this year. So there are so many, and we're focusing on the bird component, but there are also many others that benefit birds, but maybe focus on, for example, plastic pollution or the dark sky, night sky surveys through Globe at Night. I again recommend that you go to our website and our Trello board to find more resources and links to other programs, and you'd be able to find some more resources. But we are also happy to help you out if you have more questions about that. Let's see, Rick, I noticed you answered some questions. So the last question, and then I know we're a little over time, I'll just leave this for every participant. One of the questions was, these are hard projects. They take a lot of time, they take a lot of money. They take a lot of resources. What is your recommendation for helping groups to accomplish a successful community science project within the limitations of time and money and, resources? I'll start with Rick. You're unmuted, so I'll start with you.
Yeah. And so being out of time, that question, I used to teach a course that answers that question. Here's what I'm going to suggest. Go to the website of the Skudik Institute. I didn't quite spell Skudik Institute right here, but go to the website of the Skudik Institute, where I'm an adjunct faculty member, and look for the Citizen Science Toolkit that I and a bunch of colleagues put together over the last few years. I've been using that to teach courses in citizen and participatory science. Unfortunately, those courses were cut short by our current administration here in the United States, and so I have not been able to do it for the last few months. But the toolkit is there, and it's completely free, lots of videos, lots of examples, and it will answer that question about how to get started, I promise you.
Thanks, Rick. All right, I'm going to go to Steve next.
Well, I'm not sure I have anything really to add to that. I think be entrepreneurial. That's really the answer, and find a solution that's going to work for your community.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And there are, I don't know if, there is another program, I think you mentioned it, Rick, sitsci.org, which is a place where you can go in and work on developing your own citizen science project or community science project, so you can make it work within your resource needs.
Sitsci.org. Yeah, sitsci.org it was the first one. It's not the only one. There are a few good ones now, but basically it's almost like a pull down menu, drag and drop to let you start a new program that will be very scientifically defensible. I really urge you to take a look at the sitsci.org website.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Rick. And I see from the community that Alicia is saying to start where you can. So definitely you can start smaller than bigger. These are bigger projects, so start where it works for you. Amber.
Yeah, there's so much variation in how atlases are conducted, and obviously in the resources that are available to each state or country or province that's conducting an atlas. So I think like they obviously involve a ton of planning, and they do involve some money, but they can be done. Just as an example, well, so just let me back up and say, because I think I did see a question in here about like how an atlas happens in eBird. That is a specific project that we have to contract with eBird for, so we pay for that. So as an example, Puerto Rico, like I mentioned, just recently completed an atlas, which they did do in eBird, but I think they did not have the funding for, or for whatever reason, they chose not to develop that specific Puerto Rico Atlas project within eBird. So they had their birders collect data in eBird, but for free. They didn't have all of those resources then, like their own website and all those like custom maps and things. So they had to do some other way of tracking their data and showing birders their data and communicating that. And I'm not really familiar with how they did that, but probably something much cheaper. So, these things are possible, and atlases can be done with relatively few people if they are dedicated, depending on how the project is planned. So creativity and prioritizing what's most important with the project. Yeah.
All right. Well,
one last thing about that. The best way to start a new citizen science project is not to. The best way to do it is to go onto one of these databases. I just added another one. I don't know if it's scistarter.org or scistarter.com. Can't remember. but you can find hundreds, if not thousands, of projects on there. And you may find one that does what you're trying to do already. So don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, it's a good
And
point, Rick. And there are a lot of other groups out there. iNaturalist.org is a very good one that's used broadly,
yeah,
I believe, across the Western Hemisphere. It's very user-friendly for the beginner community scientist. So even, for example, to the BLM question, if you want to do just a simple survey at your site to learn about what's there, or to do something like what Steve did, a resurvey. Those are really, really informative. So if you have prior data, it's fun to have people see what they find later and helpful.
yeah. And I
I
was
want to
just going to
thank
add,
you.
somebody has probably walked where you've walked. So there's probably data out there, historic data of some kind, and sometimes it's a lot of fun to dig it out.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I want to thank our panelists today so much for your incredible work and for being with us and for giving your time for these presentations, and to everyone who joined us today from around the world. It was really nice to have you. I hope you'll join us again next month for the ethics of birding, and we look forward to sharing some more incredible panelists with you at that time as well. So thank you so much. And I'll put in the chat box if you have any questions for Environment for the Americas. You can write us as well. And we'll look forward to all that you do this year. So thank you so much. And I believe we can end the recording if